Okay, well, thank you, Ann. Thank you, certainly everybody who is here. And you are many and some familiar faces, and it's such a pleasure to be part of the Yukon Northwest Territories Nunavut program this morning. I've been all those places, and it is spectacular. And as an outsider looking in, I mean, I'm a U.S. guy, and I write newsletters for much of a U.S. audience, but we have a lot of Canadians too. It has just been a privilege and an honor to be part of the Northern experience. First thing let's do, I'm going to give everybody about, a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Give me the elevator pitch and I'll start with a friend of some years now, Doug Eaton. Why don't you, if people don't know who you are, tell them who you are.
My name is Doug Eaton. I've been working in Yukon primarily, but a little bit Northwest Territories for over 50 years as a geologist. Ran a consulting company, Archer Catherine Associates in Yukon. For many years now, I've been also the president and CEO of Strategic Metals. The name kind of sums it up in terms of the appropriateness for this discussion. We started looking at critical metals back in the early 2000s and have acquired quite a large asset base. I think Yukon is a fantastic place to look for critical metals, largely overlooked, in some cases not even appreciated that they're there. So I think it's, if you're looking for critical metals, you could do a lot worse than spend time in the Yukon. So I'll turn it over to Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon, we just heard from you, but give everybody a quick summary if they happen to step out to the washroom, during your talk or what have you.
Which would have been a good move, but so Brandon Macdonald, CEO of Fireweed Zinc, soon to be renamed Fireweed Metals, obviously with the addition of the Macdonald tungsten deposit. We are diversifying critical metals, but staying focused on that. It's something, with no disrespect to precious metals explorers and miners, they're not what we were interested in exploring for, not what we're interested in developing and eventually mining. We see critical metals as they are essential, both in terms of modern life and strategically, and it's been great to be able to take what is one of the world's largest undeveloped zinc projects and now bolt on one of the world's largest undeveloped tungsten projects, two metals that are absolutely essential, and who are the production of both dominated by countries that we wouldn't necessarily consider geopolitical allies. Happy to be here and happy to do the panel.
Okay. Ken Wheatley, would you tell us, you mentioned outside that you're a geologist, you're not a corporate guy, which a man after my own heart there. But you're from Forum. Tell us what Forum is and give us a quick rundown.
Okay, so Forum's a very small exploration company. We have most of our projects in Saskatchewan, but we do have a fairly large holding in Nunavut at this time, right around the Kigavik deposit, the uranium deposit. So we're looking for uranium and rare earths metals just west of Baker Lake. And I first started looking for uranium up there in the 70s and worked for Orano, which used to be Areva, which used to be Kojima. I was their geologist looking after Nunavut as well back then. And now with Forum, we've just acquired all the ground that Cameco used to have right west of the Kigavik project. We've picked up all that ground of ours and got some pounds in the ground because of it.
Very good.
And so we are, again, small company. We have a total of 1.8 permanent employees. And and if you ask me anything about economics or finances or company business, I still think debentures are something people wear in their mouth and their teeth are bad. But anyway, I'll hand it over to you.
From small acorns do mighty oaks grow. Robin Good from Fortune, why don't you give us a quick rundown, please?
Thank you, Byron. So my name is Robin Goad. I'm the president and CEO of Fortune Minerals Limited. We trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we are a company that's been primarily focused on the Northwest Territories. We've been operating in the Northwest Territories continuously for about 35 years, continued presence. Our main project is called the NICO, Cobalt, Gold, Bismuth, Copper asset. It's a vertically integrated project comprised of a mine and a concentrator, which will be constructed in Tlicho territory, just north of Wati, about 160 kilometers northwest of Yellowknife, for those that aren't familiar with the geography of the Northwest Territories. And we'll have a refinery in the Fort Saskatchewan area of Alberta, where we're going to process concentrates from the mine and produce cobalt sulfate for the rechargeable battery industry. There's about 1 million ounces of gold in the project, a little more than 1 million ounces, highly liquid co-product. We have 12% of the global bismuth reserves, which is the largest deposit in the world, and we have a byproduct copper. So vertically integrated project, very advanced. We have the EA, most of the environmental approvals already in place in the Northwest Territories, and hope to be constructing soon for delivering critical minerals for the North American market. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Now, a lot of people in this room, you've been here all morning, and so you've heard numerous, presentations, all of which had a lot of value. I don't want to be overly repetitious, so let's not be repetitious. Let's try a couple of different angles here. When we talk about the far north, we talk about a place that is remote. As you walk around the exhibit hall down below, you see all these companies out there. I'll just mention there's a company called I-80 Gold in Nevada because they're located right on Interstate 80, which makes life easy. Tell me about how you make your life easy since you don't have interstate highways up there to do things. Doug, you've been doing this for years. Tell us about the infrastructure challenges and what it is you're working on to make it happen.
Yeah, there definitely are challenges with most of the projects, and that is one of the criteria that we use for identifying properties that we want to work on and acquire is proximity to roads. Unfortunately, there's a major program that was approved for Yukon that would result in a major trunk highway in southwestern Yukon, large funding from the federal government, and for various reasons that project is stalled. And I think it's really important to get back on track. Similarly, I think Yukon desperately needs a power source that's reliable, probably a large dam or maybe a small nuclear reactor, open to possibilities, but it has to be a federal initiative. The territory does not have enough people to justify a major power development. It'd be far, far too dangerous. There's a number of advanced projects, Casino, for example, with their large copper deposit, BMC with the large zinc deposit, that are on the cusp of going ahead, but they're going to need power, and we're going to need the Fed's help.
Brandon, I'll run that same question to you. I remember visiting your project a couple of years ago, and there was an old sort of artifact of a road that went out there and everything, but you're fairly remote, but at the same time, you've got this incredible zinc deposit, and now you're breaking into the tungsten space, which, talk about critical. We could talk about that all day, but what's your big hurdle out there in terms of infrastructure or getting energy and supplies to your project?
Yeah, well, the U.S. Army graciously built a road to our project 70 years ago, so for which we thank them.
Thank you, Army.
But the discovery of the original discovery in that district was found because prospectors were using that road. So in 1951, prospectors working for Hudbay found the Tom deposit because it was an easy corridor to use to travel up and do exploration. We understand now that infrastructure is critical. Our road needs improvements, and the feds and territorial government have stepped up there. But broadly in Yukon, it's not just the presence or absence of roads. When we're looking at new roads, there is not surprisingly and justifiably concern about new infrastructure and pressures that might put on wildlife. So it's good to see development in access controls on roads, but more needs to happen. Because certainly as mining companies, mega projects don't get built because there's infrastructure. Infrastructure gets built because there's mega projects, right? And so we're trying to draw infrastructure into our region, while particularly First Nations communities might be concerned about what the impact of that infrastructure is. And it's not necessarily about our project; it can be about hunters or hunting pressure, right? So how do we work with them to control access and make sure that impacts that are not mining related don't get put onto the shoulders of mining companies? So that's the key thing, and in I think Yukon and everything Doug said is we understand fully the concerns about infrastructure. We want it, and we want to figure out how do we do this responsibly so that everyone's happy, everyone except the hunters and whatever. It's not my problem.
Yeah. Ken, talk about what you're facing. You've got a project in Nunavut as well as your Saskatchewans, but how's your infrastructure doing up there?
Well, the big difference, of course, Saskatchewan, for the most part, with it right near the borders with the territories, there's roads available, so we can get pretty close to our targets there. In Nunavut, everything has to be done a year in advance. So this fall, we'll be bringing up fuel, everything that we need to get to Baker Lake. From Baker Lake, it gets hauled overland next, probably May, onto site over top of the snow, and then everything is done by helicopter. There's no driving around at all up there. So we have to add that cost. And again, with the price of fuel keeps going up and up, it's a sort of a moving goalpost as to how much we got to get money for investors to invest in our company and hope that we get everything into place for next summer. And we say hope like hell another Fukushima doesn't happen between now and then. And we have all this stuff sitting up there, and we go, well, nobody cares about uranium anymore. So
Yeah, well, that kind of logistical challenge is immense because you have to pack up everything backwards in the sense that you have to unload it, when and where you need it. Robin, I'm just going to give that same question to you. Tell us about your project and, how accessible, how logistically doable is everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because when you're operating in the north, infrastructure is essential for, if you can't fly a product out, you have to have some way of basically getting those concentrates or the bulk materials out. So we're very fortunate in that we are close to existing infrastructure, and also the government of the Northwest Territories, the Tlicho government, and the Canadian government have collaborated on constructing a 97-kilometer all-season road to the community of Wati. And this is a tremendous example of where governments, companies, and First Nations basically working together for mutual benefit, because we will be one of the few projects in the north that actually is commutable from communities. And from our perspective, we had to be able to get our concentrates out. So one of the most important economic attributes to our project is a high concentration ratio or low mass pull, which means that we can recover all of our metals in 4% of the original mass. And then we truck that out to essentially along that road that we will also construct. We have to construct a 50-kilometer spur road on Tlicho territory down to we will transload it onto the Canadian National Railway, which is also important legacy infrastructure that was put in place for mining. And we will convey that material down to Alberta, where we have the reagents and the other things that are necessary to build our refinery. So great existing infrastructure, and that infrastructure that was, again, attributed to mining. So it's important to recognize that. And then also a forward-looking governments of the Northwest Territories primarily, as well as the Tlicho government, to get a road to a community, which is also a benefit to the people, reduces the cost of living, and also makes our project enabled.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit now to a little bit more of a macro issue. We mentioned earlier today that obviously, we're in the far north, and so, you've got seasonal issues, you've got massive just climate geographical issues that you have to deal with. One of the things that I always look at in my newsletter writing and such, I look at things in terms of energy, because it takes energy to do everything, for the jet fuel, the helicopter fuel, the truck fuel, the diesel generator fuel. And we're in a world of rapidly rising energy costs and just it seems to me, embedded inflation. I mean, the U.S. government says, it's 8.6%. They lie. It's twice that, maybe 3 times, depending on, who you want to believe. I don't want to believe them because they lie. But they do, I'm sorry. And so here we are with you need grade to make the project work. So you've got your grade, you've got your project, you can get there by road, get there. But how do you move forward in the current environment of apparently structural inflation and definitely, very high energy costs in terms of your diesel, your jet fuel, everything else. I mean, by the time you bring your supplies up there, that's a $50 cheeseburger that guy's eating for lunch, So, yeah, Robin, why don't you start? We'll kind of work our way backwards.
Okay, that's another great question because, and I'll deal with the energy first. So we're only 22 kilometers from the Snare hydroelectric dams, and one would think, okay, well, let's hook up. But unfortunately, there's insufficient free energy, basically. So we have to start the mine with LNG. And LNG has about 30% less carbon impact, so it reduces your carbon tax impact as well. And we also recover the heat, which is worth about 5 cents a kilowatt hour as well. We will hook up to the grid. There are two major projects, one project and one opportunity that I'll talk about. Just near Wati, the community that's 50 kilometers to the south, there's a Runner River potential project, which is 14 megawatts, which is an easy incremental expansion to the existing grid. The Northwest Territories government is working with the feds right now on an expansion of the Tallston system, which is south of Great Slave Lake, which will then connect with an intertie to the Yellowknife grid, and that would enable us also to hook up. In terms of inflation, we're a vertically integrated project, so we understand that very, very, very clearly. We have good commodity prices, but we're going to have high costs, and we're working very hard to try and reduce the capital costs, part of which was contributed through this road. Power is another thing we're looking at, and we've also purchased a steel fabrication plant in Lamont County north of Edmonton, which reduces our capital cost by about $40 million. So we're looking at these kinds of things to looking for opportunities to reduce our exposure to inflation, because it is an issue. You're correct.
Yeah. Ken, what do you see from your perspective up there?
Well, our goal is not to develop a mine, that's for sure. What we want to do is find enough uranium to help make the Kigavik deposit run by Orano to make that economic. And basically the Kigavik deposit, they went to get the permits for it, and it was basically denied because they couldn't come up with a time as to when they were going to start. And because of that, was the reason for that was because the price of uranium had to be high enough to warrant getting that started. So now, of course, the price of uranium is going to have to keep going up and up as the cost to work up in the Arctic and the cost of the fuel keeps going up. So, but anyway, our goal is just to find enough more, uranium to make that project more feasible. But yes, it's the cost of fuel. We're running on diesel and chopper fuel that we have to buy now and have it ready for next year. So it's a big deal for us as a small company having to make these expenditures now and just to use them for next year.
Everybody I talk to who works in the uranium space, at whatever level, has their magic number. What's the price of uranium to make a new deposit developable? And I mean, the baseline number is $75 a pound, which is more than it is now. But I mean, so we're really living off legacy mining in terms of uranium as things go. So it's just a question of it's a question of when, not if, I suppose. Brandon, sort of the same question, but feel free to talk about your tungsten deposit as well, because I think that's a very exciting development. I don't think you gave the number of what percentage of tungsten comes from that big country over in Asia. It's like what,
80%.
80%.
Yeah. But I actually first I want to touch on something that Doug had originally talked about, which is about the need for power. And I think our last study on our zinc project, we conceived it was powered by LNG. That the last feasibility study on Macdonald was that it would be diesel generation. That there's an economic reason why you don't want to do that, which is that hooking up to grid power is a significant capital investment, but then it's cheaper going forward. There's also kind of a moral imperative there, which is that there's a climate crisis, and designing new mines which are fossil fuel powered is probably not a great idea, right? So if it can possibly be avoided, certainly we would like to be on grid power. We'd like to be on a grid that's, you know, dominated by renewables, for both cost reasons and you know, to keep the carbon intensity of our production down. You know, I think that the challenge the North has because of, you know, small grids, remote mines, you know, self-generation, is that we become necessarily high carbon intensity producers of these metals. That becomes expensive, and that also becomes a problem in terms of making it difficult even for partnerships. You know, our project has been big enough to attract the attention of major mining companies, but they make it pretty clear that they are judged rightfully by the carbon intensity of their production. So how do we as a project design a way to get that down, right? So that's an opportunity to collaborate with the governments and you know, certainly there also with First Nations, because there are models of Indigenous-owned power lines that possibly can be built and backstopped by government and leased to us, right? So there's win-wins to go there that help make these projects more viable and also help, you know, reduce emissions. So that's kind of an essential thing when you're remote. And then in terms of inflation, you know, seriously, everyone who's been building a mine the last couple of years, I feel a lot of pity for them because it was a very bad time to take your project financing based on, you know, numbers you had just completed and then faced with a whole new reality of costs. You know, we'll be updating our study on both projects, Mactung and MacPass, and the capital will be significantly higher, even with some efficiencies baked into it because things are just getting more expensive. So does that get reflected? It has to necessarily be reflected in the base case commodity prices we use. So the question is, do investors understand that, you know, I think the long-term consensus for zinc is $1.08 a pound or something like that, which is a total fantasy. There's no way that's the long-term price, right? And so we have to pick a more aggressive price, right? And do people think we're being unrealistic, or do they understand the structural changes that are happening in the market? So it's a communication issues for us and all of us is how do we're of course bullish on metals, or else we wouldn't be in this industry. I mean, you could argue that we're somewhat masochistic being in this industry, but I still am a metals bull, right? So yeah, it's that communication about what the real impact of this inflation is and what that means for long-term prices.
Yeah, and then we get the issue that we're in a traditionally cyclical industry with, you know, ups and downs and the whole business cycle and such. Doug, you've been doing this for a long time. You mentioned how many years earlier. I won't repeat that number and embarrass you, but give us your perspective. You've been around. You've seen a few things.
Yeah, I'd really like to touch on something you just mentioned in a second, Byron, but as an exploration company, and solely an exploration company, yeah, it's going to be tough for us in the next few years. The inflation is going to bite into the amount of work that can actually be done. We're going to have to really be careful how much we use helicopters because that's where a lot of fuel goes, or the fuel costs come in. But one of the things that this inflation is going to create is opportunities. And I think as an industry, we have to realize that, as Brandon said, the numbers that are being floated around now for future metal prices are really unrealistic. I saw a report the other day, for example, that estimated that the average new copper deposit needs $8 copper to be viable. Clearly we're going to have to see higher pricing. And over time, that will be reflected in PEAs and pre-feasibilities and whatnot. But I think as an industry, we've shown the ability to innovate, take advantage of opportunities. I know that there's metals now, the critical metals, which were never looked for before, which are going to be in high demand. Brandon's tungsten is a good example, but there's lots of others that are similarly going to become important. And there's opportunities in minerals as well. A company that I co-founded is looking at the idea of taking waste materials, for example, mine tailings, that are already pulverized, and they're rocky materials. They can be heated, and they can produce an alternative to Portland cement. Now, why is that important for inflation? Well, inflation is going to really, really drive up the cost of transportation. In the north, a bag of cement, about a third of the price of a bag of cement is the actual purchase price. The rest is transportation. So if you have a scalable project that you can produce cement in the north at at a reasonable cost, those transportation savings are going to become more and more important. And I think that we have to look at opportunities for joint ventures between First Nations and companies to recognize all those little opportunities that exist all up and down the supply chain. And I think if we can, it's going to help the North address the inflation concerns that are coming.
Okay, very good, thank you. Let's talk about the human dimension of things. A couple of, we talk often about, First Nation relationships, and also we talk about just sort of the intellectual capital that you need in terms of geologists, engineers, what have you. We'll start with Doug and work our way back across here. What do you see as the state of the the demographic state of the art out there? Should we be hopeful, or should we be worried? Should we, go back to our local school boards and beat them up over, you don't teach enough math and physics or whatever? Although that'd probably get us investigated by the FBI if we even said that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a tough time if we don't, again, use some creativity. I'm going to start it with an actual situation that happened. COVID was one of the most wonderful things that ever happened to my company. And the reason that's true is the Yukon made it more difficult for people to go back and forth into the Yukon Territory. But even more importantly, it meant the tourists couldn't come. Now, that's not very good for the territory, as you can imagine, but it was great for us because there was a lot of people in the territory who previously had jobs in other industries, and they became available to us, and we were able to give them jobs in mining and exploration that that they would never probably have taken in the past. And as a result of it, we had 80% of our employees last year with the consulting company that were Yukoners, and nearly half of all of our employees were First Nation. And our retention on our employees from year to year is nearing 80%. So we've been able to create a local labor force. And now I know there are initiatives, our company, but others are pushing very hard to create educational opportunities for those employees using the local college and other institutions outside of the territory. But we're finding that if we train local people, they're more likely to come back and stay in the industry and work with the companies working in Yukon. So I think that effort is really, really important going forward to make sure that we hire local and keep families together. That's my main point. Beyond that, somebody in the previous panel said they should create a geology video game. Then we might actually get some men back. More than half our employees are now female. It seems that women actually like going in the bush. Men would rather stay home and play with their video game.
I'll just add to that on the previous panel we had Tara Christie, and she's married to John Macdonald. And when they were building the Victoria Eagle gold mine project, they actually advertised across Canada saying, if you're from the Yukon and come on home, come on back. They got a lot of people, on the airplanes flying back to Whitehorse saying, yeah, I grew up here, but I couldn't find a job and I had to leave and go do something else. But they had a lot of, people who came home, so to speak. Brandon,
Sorry, can I just put in one
Oh,
second?
sure,
Yeah, in the 1980s, the Yukon and 1990s, Yukon went through a real lull, and there was a lot of families who left Yukon very reluctantly to get work largely in the oil patch and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And absolutely, we have a lot of people who come back and say, I grew up in Faro, or I grew up in one of the communities, or Whitehorse, and they want to come home. So we got to create the opportunities for them. And I hate to say it, we've got to start paying people working in geology a more reasonable wage. If you look at the wage that is paid to engineers, and then you look at the wage that's paid to geologists, it's about 70% or less, and that's got to change if we want to have more geologists.
Well, I'm in favor of higher pay for geologists. Brandon, you have quite a camp going on out there. You have a lot of people in and out. Tell us about your experiences there.
Yeah, I think we'll have 70 people this year in camp, which is our largest ever. and it's, you know, people is becoming I think people is the number one crisis facing the mining industry right now, because there's simply not the skills, right? And it's not, you can't be like, well, I need more geologists and push a button and they appear. There's a lag time to get young people interested in geology, get them educated in geology, and then get them trained and productive. So there's not a simple fix to it. And you know, Doug, you're saying that we should be paying our geologists more. We are, and we are that's increasing very rapidly, because retention of skilled employees is critical and is difficult. You know, one of the benefits of having PDAC in June instead of March is that none of my geologists are here, so nobody can poach them, right? And that is an actual, it's a problem. It's a problem, right? So I don't want them to know what opportunities exist, right? But we actually, you know, we just went through a major exercise on compensation, trying to understand the pace at which compensation is changing, and you know, junior geologists. Like, I think when I graduated in '99, which is a terrible time to graduate as a geologist, you know, the pay was peanuts, right? And now graduate geologists are very nearly approaching six figures, fresh out of school, right? So it's a lot different, and it's necessary, and because that, you know, quite honestly, I think I certainly became a geologist because I love working outdoors, right? And I thought about chemistry. Decided on geology because I wanted to be outside, and my family was in the industry, so I had some comfort with it. But no matter how much people love something, if the economic opportunity is better in another program, that's pretty hard sales pitch to make, right? Like, yes, you get to work outdoors, but we're going to pay you for the same quality of work. We're going to pay you materially less than if you're an engineer or something like that, or a programmer or something like that, right? So it's we have to think as an industry, how do we attract talent and retain it?
Yeah, I'm a geologist myself. I mean, I started out in the oil industry, which was traditionally, again, cyclical, and we used to joke that the optimist was a guy who brought his lunch to work. You know, you might be there to eat it. But Ken, you are a real geo. You know, what do you see out there in terms of you know, the people that you have to work with?
Well, we managed to hire the .8 geologist. He's still working for another company part-time, but it's really hard to hire the young kids now, because they're, again, being cyclical, there's boom and bust. It's a boom time right now, and trying to attract people to come to this company, and they just see, well, an old fart like me up here, and there's nobody else in the company. Why would I join this? And when there's a lot of other companies to join. Boom and bust. I mean, I went through the 1982, where a lot of the geologists went into finance and whatever else, anything they could, because they had enough of this on and off cycle. So we keep losing, we gain them again, and then we go through another down cycle, we lose a bunch, and it's just not working that well. But that's, if you can survive the downturns, you're doing fine. For Kigavik, you know, that Nunavut area that we have now, Agnico Eagle's done a very good job of hiring the locals up there and getting well-paid jobs, and everybody's quite enjoying them. And what the goal is to have Kigavik come on stream when the gold mines finally start petering out, is to have all this you know, talent that we have there now come over to the Kigavik project, if that starts up at the same time. Now, if you want to rant, I can go on about the school systems now, and I'll be thrown out of here for being totally politically incorrect.
Let's ask Robin the same question. See what he has to say from his company's perspective.
I'm going to deviate away from geologists, even though I am a geologist as well. And when we couldn't find a geologist for our drill program last November, we sent the CEO. But I'm more thinking, we're a development stage company. We're going to be constructing. We have an opportunity that we're faced with, which is not good for the Northwest Territories, unfortunately, but the closure of the Diavik mine, which is coming almost the same time that we're planning to be hopefully commissioning our mine. So it's around 2025. We have hundreds of well-trained, skilled people, a lot of them from the communities that are going to be out of work, and I hope that we're going to be able to land those people. If you want to talk about longer-term issues, I'm also concerned about trades. And I would rather put my effort into something that's transferable. So let's call the Northwest Territories and the community colleges there. I would like to see more tradespeople coming out of there and hopefully being able to retain those people up in the north, which leads us into another opportunity, and that's the symbiotic relationship between First Nations and the mining industry, because who best to work in the local mines but the people that live
Hold the
there.
mic closer.
Sorry. Thank you. I can project too. But anyways, I think First Nations and the resource industry, that is something that we have to build on continuously. It's a huge opportunity for our staffing issues and also getting people employed and staying in there where they come from.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our time. In fact, we're down to our last minute. I'll just sort of take the moderator's preference here and just say, we've heard a lot of fascinating things in this panel and this morning. A couple of the takeaways that there's plenty of money that can be attracted into this sector. There's plenty of opportunity up north. The minerals are there in the rocks, the beautiful geology ranging from recent volcanics all the way to 2-point-something billion-year-old Precambrian. The ore deposits are there. The grade is there. You've got people who want to do it. And the opportunities for younger people out there. So if you know people, try to get them study chemistry in high school and major in geology or whatever, learn a trade, welding, electrician. The money is there. The jobs are there. These are lifetime career opportunities. I would just add one last thing, that in terms of developing remote areas, I spent time in the oil industry, covered the mining industry. One of my specialties, you might say, was offshore oil development. And what I learned watching the North Sea, for example, was that development is like Velcro. The more you do, the more that other things can stick to you. Like if you build a pipeline here, you can do other things that would be completely uneconomic, but as long as that pipeline's there, you got it done, And the same thing in the far north, when you build the road, it might be just a road to a mine, but there other things develop off of that, and depends on what the pace is. But it's out there. I think that the northern regions of Canada are set for the next century. Your children, your grandchildren will be working up there, gainfully employed, doing very important things. In the natural resource space, the environmental space, and just building a better world, the opportunities out there. So thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. Thank you, everybody on YouTube who watches this. And with that, I'm the last thing between you and lunch. So that's it.